veto really occurs at the state level. You have to have an executive officer that has the authority to approve action of the legislative body. Just a quick step back. Our government is a republic. It was forged by the framers as a constitutional republic. In that, it means that it represents the people. And in the context of how our government was formed, there's three branches of it. There's the judiciary, there's the legislative, and then there's the executive branch. Each one kind of checks each other, with the exception of the judiciary. It's kind of hard to check the judiciary, but generally they're the last branch that gets engaged in public policy, because basically they rule on matters of law regarding whether it's constitutional, whether it's the right thing to do, or whether it wasn't. And if no one files a complaint with the courts cannot step in by themselves and take actions against the executive branch or the legislative branch. Someone would have to sue either the governor, and if it's a state, or mayor if it's at the city level. So if no one sues, the courts can know it's going wrong, but there's nothing they can do about it. When we get to the legislative side, the legislature isn't the end of it all. Yes, they can decide what gets made as law, meaning what can get passed. If it's a Republican caucus, the Republicans can determine what bills that are introduced go to the governor's desk. Now, excuse me again. Once bills are passed, they first start in the House. They would go to the Senate, which we call the House of Opposite Origin. The legislature is divided into two chambers. So you have the House and you have the Senate. That's the same thing at the federal level. But once they do both of those, and the affirmative vote then it becomes a law, a bill that's been enacted, and it goes to the governor for signature. Should the governors believe there's still fundamental material flaws in that bill, even though both chambers of the legislature has passed it, the governor has the authority to veto that, to say that my people have looked at it, we think you got it wrong, it's bad policy for the state or whatever, and so I'm going to veto it as the governor. A single person representing the executive branch has that authority by our Constitution. Should that happen, the bill then could go back to the legislative bodies that passed it, and they could override the governor's position on that. So it happens on occasions. It's not very often. It's not that often, I guess, that the governor vetoes a piece of legislation, because remember, 101 members looked at it in the House, 48 members looked at it in the Senate. What makes this one person more knowledgeable and more informed than 148 people who's already looked at it? But there are cases where it does happen. And so when it goes back to the legislative branch, the Constitution requires that they have a supermajority vote in each chamber to override the governor's veto. And that's what we call about overriding a veto. So I can pass a piece of legislation in the House of Representatives with 51 votes. That's a simple majority. If it gets vetoed, I have to have 76 votes in the affirmative to override the veto. So the bar is raised somewhat substantially should the governor veto something. The same thing would happen in the Senate. It takes 25 votes.